Okay, so to say that super succinctly, if you have depression, there is a nutrient deficiency going on that has to do with methylation. We can do a genetic test and figure out what you're most likely having a hard time creating.
Yes.
Is there one, like, so we talked earlier, there's basically 5-ish buckets that people break down into.
Yep.
Is depression a known of those 5 buckets? Is it a combination of different buckets?
Depression depending, it's a combination of different buckets, but what's astounding is you see people that can't, for example, have a deficiency in SAMe, S-Adenosyl Methionine, SAMe. So what happens in the human body is we take a normal amino acid called homocysteine. We break this amino acid down into another harmless amino acid called methionine. Methionine goes up into the brain, it quiets the mind, it helps to actually break down neurotransmitters, and it eventually becomes something called S-Adenosyl Methionine, SAMe. People that have deficiencies in SAMe, that has been linked to depression. I'm not saying that every person that's depressed needs to take something called SAMe, nor am I saying that every person that's depressed has a methylfolate deficiency. But if you look at research into folate deficiency, B-complex deficiency, and SAMe deficiency, you will find enormous correlations between the rate of depression and the rate of deficiency in those specific nutrients, SAMe, B-complex, and methylfolate. And these are highly prevalent in ancestral diets. They are highly absent in the modern diet.
How did we historically get those things in?
Historically, we got them from fruits, cruciferous vegetables, and grass-fed meats: meat, fish, chicken, eggs, yes, even dairy, and cruciferous vegetables and fruits. But now, a lot of these, and what impairs the ability for us to draw these nutrients out of a lot of fruits, for example, are pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, and preservatives. When we first came up with preservatives, they were actually called anti-digestives. But, and then some smart marketer said, well, shit, people aren't going to go to the anti-digestive part of the supermarket, so we need to change that name. We'll call it preservatives. It's just like we spray all of our grains with folic acid in the United States. We spray all white flour, all white pasta, all white bread, and all white rice in the United States is sprayed with the chemical folic acid. You don't have a choice over that unless you buy organic. It is all fortified or enriched. See, they don't call it sprayed with folic acid. They call it fortified or enriched. They don't call it anti-digestive. They call it preserved. So it's really hard for us to navigate this maze. I mean, the food pyramid is the worst thing to ever happen to humanity. I ought to flip that thing exactly upside down.
Because it has people intaking so much glucose?
Because it has people taking in so much glucose and so much high glycemic carbohydrate. I mean, people that eat the most sugar have the highest blood fat. People that eat the most sugar are the fattest because, sugar raises our level of insulin. And the primary role of insulin, yes, well, portion of its role is to actually metabolize glucose and move glucose into the cell. A very large role of the hormone insulin is to block any other form of energy use in the body. And so when sugars are high, insulin is high. When insulin is high, we can't access the fatty acid pathway. So what happens? Fat begins to build up. Well, where's the first place fat builds up? In the blood, in the form of something called a triglyceride. Well, as triglycerides begin to rise, it makes the size of the cholesterol molecule smaller. As cholesterol gets smaller in particulate size, it gets more dangerous. Two people with the exact same LDL cholesterol level, one could be a marker for longevity, and the other one could be a marker for cardiovascular disease, depending on the particulate size of that molecule. Because remember from high school geometry, as the size of a sphere gets smaller, its surface area to volume ratio goes up. So if you had 2 basketballs of cholesterol and you transport fat, triglyceride, around the blood on the surface of these 2 basketballs, and now I add more fat, right? But I only have 2 basketballs. I have to make these 4 softballs. And then I add more fat. I have to make them 8 baseballs. And I add more fat. I have to make them 16 golf balls. And then I have to make them 32 little BBs. I've never changed the amount of cholesterol. I've changed the size of the cholesterol to increase the surface area to carry more fat. And this is why when we eat high amounts of sugar and we have high insulin in the blood and triglyceride builds up in the blood, it starts to make our cholesterol more dangerous. This is why the triglyceride to cholesterol ratio is actually more important than the cholesterol level.